Welcome to the Upper Room Chapel. I'm Kimberly, publisher of the Upper Room, and I welcome you to this holy space. Wherever and whenever we gather, we come together to pray with and on behalf of the world. As staff of the Upper Room and partners with you in this journey, we are so honored to have us this time together to just breathe and to pray. As we here in the United States exhale and collect ourselves after the historic Chauvin verdict, we acknowledge that there are many around the world who suffer, tremble with fear, and hold deep anxieties. Today, may you know that Jesus is our peace, who has broken down every wall. Cast all your anxieties upon him, for Jesus cares for you. Let not your heart be troubled. Lean into the healing heart of God this day. In this world, Jesus said, you will have trials of various kinds, but be encouraged, for Jesus has overcome the world. Sin and death are swallowed up in the victory of Christ's resurrection power. Our destiny is a new creation, a new heaven and earth, where old things are passed away, and behold, all things become new. We are resurrection people. In this moment, we also want to acknowledge the pain and suffering of the families who have lost loved ones due to violent and misappropriated police actions. Among the many who have lost their lives, today we speak the names of George Floyd and Michaela Bryant. I'd like to invite us to take a long pause and to hold this space for 9 minutes and 29 seconds, the amount of time it took to end Mr. Floyd's life, and to take this time to earnestly pray, as Amos 5:24 reminds us, for justice to roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream among all the peoples of the earth, including in the hearts of the persons who serve in uniform, those called to protect and serve. May all who follow Jesus be known as peacemakers in the earth.
Together we lift our hearts to God and say, Amen. I'm Kara Lassen Oliver, the Executive Director of the Center for Christian Spiritual Formation here at the Upper Room. And for the remainder of our time together, Kimberly and I would like to invite you into a time of Examen. For those who are unfamiliar with this Christian spiritual practice, it was a favorite of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, a 16th century Spanish theologian and mystic. This practice can best be summarized as a technique of prayerful reflection on the events of the day in order to detect God's presence and discern God's direction for us. It is an ancient practice in the church that can help us see God's hand at work in our whole experience. We will guide you through a series of questions for us to consider together. After the questions have been read, there will be a brief period of reflection in which we invite you to share your thoughts in the chats and comments if you choose.
What have we done? The Examen invites us to take an honest, unvarnished look at our past, not to be paralyzed by it, but to know it and to discern a way forward. When have we been proud of being an inclusive and equitable person or community? When have we failed to be inclusive and to be equitable in our communities? I invite you to make your comments as you feel led.
What are we doing? At the 1963 March on Washington, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. spoke powerfully of the fierce urgency of now. What are we doing today to stretch our identity as a beloved community or a person seeking shalom? Whose help do we need to interrupt patterns of systemic racism or colonialism in our communities and in ourselves?
What ought we to do? The Ignatian Examen leads us to choice making and imagination about the future. Given what we know about ourselves and our world, how are we called to respond as peacemakers in our families and in our communities? What is our individual calling? What kind of community ought we to be co-creating now with our fellow human beings?
Thank you for your vulnerability and willingness to take this journey of examination for the sake of moving our world forward, down the road toward reconciliation and hope as an emerging, beloved community. Hear now this closing prayer composed by Rabbi Andrea Goldstein of Congregation Shur Emet in St. Louis, Missouri. Source of all being, creator of all life, may your goodness find its way into the hearts of all your children. May those who wield power do so with a balance of wisdom, justice, and compassion. May those who feel powerless remember their intrinsic worth and also act with a balance of wisdom, integrity, and compassion. May we all feel called to action based on the injustices of racism and see ourselves not as enemies of one another, not in a struggle with one another, but as human beings created in the image of God, connected to one another's well-being. May all of us come to acknowledge the racism that is pervasive in our nation and around the world. May we commit to sitting down with one another in honest dialogue, opening our hearts in compassion to one another, bearing witness to the pain and fear of one another, even if and especially if the other looks and seems so different from ourselves. May we commit to joining together in acts of justice that will bring about equality in education, economic opportunities, law enforcement, and judicial proceedings. May each of us come to understand that ultimately, my experience of freedom, justice, and peace is inextricably linked to the freedom, justice, and peace of every other person in our country and city, our country and our world. May we open our eyes to the invisible lines of connection that unite us, and with clarity of vision, continue to work for a world where every person's life is valued, cherished, and loved. Amen. Thank you for joining us today, and remember, you are beloved and you are not alone. Go in peace.